Hello, Misfits, and welcome. In today's episode, I want to talk about 5 hard truths about DMing that nobody really tells you about up front. These are things that I kind of figured out and learned about on the way, along the way, and they can be hard pills to swallow, but I'm going to share this advice not with the purpose of scaring you away, but with the purpose of making sure that you're aware of what you're getting yourselves into, and you get to hear about how I approach these issues and how I have decided to handle them or move past them. With all of that said, let's get into today's video. Number 1, it costs money. All those lovely books and fancy subscriptions are not free, and there's sort of this tradition or culture or sort of expectation that a lot of these purchases fall on the DM's shoulders. This is something that's sort of a little starting to change a bit, but at least when I was getting started, there's just sort of this understanding that the DM is sort of paying and providing a lot of this stuff. And the players sort of show up and experience the game and maybe provide snacks, and that's kind of it. So I want to sort of, be a little candid and be a little honest about, sort of the cost of DMing. Alright, I've got my list pulled up, so I'm going to look at it. But last year, I spent roughly $196 on books alone. I spent $50 on a Roll20 subscription, $50 on a D&D Beyond subscription, $35 for my Scabbard subscription to sort of manage and organize my campaign. I also spent about $36 total on Patreon for just these maps and tokens that I could use in-game, and that totaled about $367. There have been years where I shouldered that entire cost on my own, but last year I asked for my players to help me out a little bit and kind of contribute to paying for all of these different things that we all use. Now, I didn't factor all of those things into the amount that I asked them for, and sort of, I think that's something that each table should sort of talk about and decide. Do you want to pay for all of this yourself, or do you want your players to help you out? How much are you comfortable asking them for? How much are you comfortable paying for yourself? What are they willing to do and provide? I didn't really factor in a lot of those book costs, but maybe that's something to consider, because why do we buy the books? Is it for ourselves, or is it for the feats and races and subclasses for our players? Is it a bit of both? I think there's a lot of things to talk about here, and nothing is getting cheaper. Everything is getting more and more expensive. You can find sort of cheaper routes. Path Builder is cheaper than Wanderer's Guide, but there's, a trade-off in the functionality. Foundry is, on the whole, cheaper than Roll20, but if you're paying for your server to be hosted, the cost isn't really going to be that much different in the long run. So there's a lot of things to think about here, and if you are a younger individual that doesn't have a steady source of income, or even if you're an older individual that doesn't have a steady course of income, D&D can be an expensive hobby. There's certainly less expensive ways to carry it out. You can be a bit more bare bones, not have the fancy tokens and maps and things, but that's something that you're going to have to sit down and realize that if you want it to look the way that some of these fancy games on Twitch and YouTube look, it's not going to come cheap, and you might need to sort of budget out what you can handle, what you can expect, and what you're willing to put into to sort of get that kind of nicer looking end result. But also keep in mind that a lot of this is stuff that exists in our heads. This is an imaginary story and world. You don't need all the fancy bells and whistles, so if you can do without, might be worth it to save a little bit of money. and talk to your players. Maybe they're willing to pitch in and help you out. They probably don't realize how much some of these things cost. So have that conversation. I think it's worth it to do that. Number 2, and this is a hard one, but people are unreliable. You will learn more about the work ethics of your peers that are at your table than you probably ever cared to. Being a DM is like being a manager or a boss or even a teacher. You are running the company. You're managing these individuals. You give them tasks to complete, like writing a backstory or rolling up a character, and then you have to wait and discover how good they are at completing that task and how long it takes them to do that. This may lead you to discover that some of your players have a better work ethic than others, and that can be a hard pill to swallow. You can stress about how much you want to build a campaign around your players' backstories all you want, but some of them will still probably wait until the night before your first session to give you the information you've been waiting for. It's an unfortunate truth that people, whether they mean to be or not, are reliably unreliable. I think the best way to deal with this is honestly to just let go of perfection and learn to accept what you are given. Don't let that last-minute cancellation bum you out. Just have fun with the people that are there at your table. Don't stress over that backstory you're still waiting for. Build the campaign around the ones that you have. And I think it's also important to let your players know that when they aren't there or when they don't provide you the things that you've asked them for, that it affects your ability to build the story around them. And I don't think that you should share that information with the intention of implying that players are punished when they don't do what you want, because sometimes life is just hard and things happen and people make mistakes and it's unavoidable. No, I think you should share that honesty and bit of information with them just so you can be transparent and just sort of let them know that if things don't pan out the way that maybe they expected, or they're not as involved in the story as they had hoped, that maybe that they're part of the reason. It's a tough thing. This is one of the hardest things and kind of like the most uncomfortable to talk about, but I am pretty sure every DM can relate to kind of being in this position where you realize that not everybody is as OCD about things as you are. Nobody's going to be as obsessed to do this stuff as much as you are. It's going to be difficult. Number 3, you need to multitask a lot. Honestly, far too much happens in any single game or session for one person to handle and keep track of, but that is how the game is structured. You will be expected to keep track of conditions, world lore, relationships with other characters, class and race abilities, spells, geographic locations, and far more, all while trying to talk in character, flip through pages of your books, jot down notes, cue up music, and roll dice with what's probably your 8th set of hands given all the stuff that you have to juggle. Yes, it is absurd, and I'm pretty sure most players don't even fully understand the sheer number of things we're trying to manage within a game and a single session. For this, I suggest asking for your players to give you a bit of grace here. Let them know that there are times when you're going to need to pause and look things up. If they ask for, information like, hey, I wrote my parents, they haven't replied, be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, can you remind me what you wrote? Can you, just give me a little refresher on that? It slipped my mind. Just be honest about that stuff. I think that's perfectly understandable. And there are some other things that I think I would recommend as well. You should maybe see if there's a good way that you can take notes or record what happens during the session. My first campaign that I ever ran, at the end of the session, I would stop and write a summary of everything that happened. Like a really short, 4-sentence recap of what happened in that session. And then last campaign, I started recording the audio of each game, and I would go back and listen back if I needed to remember things. And then now I just fully record, do screen capture of our games. Something else that I think helps is when your players are wanting to send information home, or are expecting letters, or want to write letters to other people, or share information with just one NPC, I typically will ask for them to put that in writing. Like, oh, you want to write your parents? You need to text that to me so I can have that in writing to refer to, because, I mean, that could be a very obscure small bit of information that's hard to find in the middle of a 3+ hour session. And I think practice also just helps with this. The more you get used to multitasking and juggling these things, the better at it you will be. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it is true. Humans are kind of remarkable in the fact that when we do things over and over and over again, we become really, really good at it. And the same is true with multitasking. I remember just floundering and drowning in my first few sessions with all the stuff I was trying to keep track of. But now, you can watch some of our sessions, and I am holding conversations with players while secretly adjusting the number of monsters in the next room, because I can tell that the encounter is not balanced, and I'm at the same time I'm queuing up music and rolling things and jotting down notes. You will get better at it with time and practice. And if your players are giving you grief about you having to stop and double check things or read a spell description or something, make them DM a game or two just to remind them how much there is to handle. Because honestly, unless they have experienced being a dungeon master, they really have no way of knowing just how much you're dealing with and how much you're trying to juggle. And if they haven't DM'd in a long time, then they've probably forgotten how stressful it can be. Number 4, with great power comes great responsibility. When you become a DM, and especially if you are awarded the title of Forever DM, you very well might become something of a de facto leader in all scenarios involving the people you play with. And this might not be something that you want or asked for. People might expect you to be in charge, and people will likely come to you with questions and expect you to have answers. For this, I'd advise you to do something that I still haven't learned how to do very well, which is say no and delegate tasks to other people. I know that I said that people are reliably unreliable, but you need to find those people at your table that you can count on and start to delegate some things to them. Maybe you task somebody with being in charge of scheduling so that that's something you don't have to deal with. Maybe you find somebody else and you task them with keeping track of spell descriptions or double checking them when you're unsure about things. Find ways to lighten your load and use your players to your advantage. If you want them to learn how to be more responsible and to learn how to better understand the kinds of things you're keeping track of, the easiest way is to give them more responsibility and give them a taste of what that is like. We just talked about all the different things that you're juggling, so there is a number of things here that you could task others with to make the process of DMing a little less burdensome. Number 5, don't get attached. I'm pretty sure players exist to be contrary. And what I mean by that is they will absolutely shit over all of your creations, whether they mean to or not. You spent 2 weeks devising a deadliest catch side quest, complete with homebrewed harpoons and a final showdown with a giant shark monster. Well, no, your players decided not to do that quest, so bye. You painstakingly designed a dungeon complete with spooky crypts filled with hand-picked treasure and teases of world lore. Sorry, but your players took a different route, and they're not going to see any of that. I know you had your favorite NPC in mind to play off the party. No, they made a bad first impression with your players, and they've decided that they don't like them. You will absolutely create things that go unseen, unused, and abused. If it really seriously bothers you, then maybe DMing isn't something that you're ready to do just yet. Because giving up ownership of the story and the characters you create is part of the game. But if you are up for that collaboration, then I would remind you that unused material can always be reused in later sessions. If it wasn't seen or experienced in the game, then it didn't really happen, and it is fair game for later use. So these were my 5 hard truths about DMing. I think some of these are really hard pills to swallow, particularly players being occasionally unreliable or letting you down. It's not something that anybody ever intends. It's not something that anybody does intentionally. At least I don't believe that. But it's something that I think it's important for DMs to be prepared for. That's a hard truth in life. I mean, the more people you have to work with, the more likely it is that somebody is going to drop the ball, or somebody is not going to do things the way that you expect them to, or the way you want them to. And in some ways, that's great. Like when it comes to players playing through the story and reacting, it's nice when they do things that you don't expect. That's part of what makes D&D fun. But when it comes to, getting their backstories prepared, or communicating their schedule with you, or just showing up, that's where things can get frustrating. And I think anybody would tell you that that's the hardest part about DMing. I mean, it's just part of life. I mean, things happen, things fall through, but don't let it get you down. That's something that I've really, really had to learn to deal with, is to just not let it affect you. Kind of get a thicker skin about it, because, it's not done intentionally. It's just part of life. It's just what happens. And you just need to learn how to continue to have fun, despite that, and know that it's not a reflection of you as a DM. It's just part of life and being human. Well, with that, I would like to remind you guys to please like and subscribe and comment below if there's another hard truth or difficult aspect of DMing that you came to learn about and understand in your experiences. Please tell me about that below. I'm very interested to hear what you guys have to say. And, liking and subscribing, that stuff really, really helps me out. And it gives me a clear idea of what you guys like and what you appreciate, what you want to see. If there are other topics for DMing and GMing that you guys want to hear about, let me know about that below as well, so that I can kind of cater my videos to you. But with all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you again next time. So I have to tell you guys that, the past couple of days, the weather has just been awful. I was a little worried that I'd have trouble filming, an episode, this week, just because literally yesterday, my power went out at least 10 different times, and so it was almost impossible to do any work on my computer, or anything, just because the power kept winking out. And then, it would come back on relatively quickly, but then I'd have to wait for the Wi-Fi router to come back on, and for all of that to boot up again, and, it kept shutting my computer off, which was just a problem, and it was just a mess. It's all fine here. Everything's fine. Just annoying, definitely. Lots of weather struggles down here where in my neck of the woods. So hopefully you've had better weather where you are. But you know what they say about March: in like a lion, out like a lamb. Though where I live, it comes in like a lion and it kind of still goes out like a lion, and it just sort of continues to be a lion for a little while. But just stay safe with the fluctuating weather. It keeps getting hot and then cold and then hot and then cold, and some people have had snow, some people have had crazy wind and storms and hail. You just be safe out there. Stay indoors if it starts to get bad, and, hopefully we will all see each other again next time, and we will all be in one piece.